Hey guys, Matthew, and welcome to the fourth episode of the From Sad to Chad series. Now, in this episode, you probably expected me to have a headhunter from the previous three episodes. I expected that myself, but in reality, I decided to wipe the slate clean and go again. I thought about the first three episodes, and I figured that there was a little bit too much RNG involved, a little bit too much getting lucky, and also it made it less replicatable for the people who don't want to get involved into the whole crafting aspect of the game too much, even though I highly recommend learning it. And it also just made it a little bit less relatable too. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go from scratch yet again, and this time around we're going to do it right. So here we are with episode number 4, which is essentially episode number 1, or a complete restart of everything. So what I did is I decided to keep the same character, so at this point this character is worth about 2 exalts or so, including, you know, the cluster setup that we have going on here with the large and the medium, including everything else. Roughly 2 exalts to build this entire character. I'll have a POE down in the description if you're interested in. I didn't even bother changing the helmet, even though I'm no longer using shrines on the Atlas, but we're going to talk about the strategy in a bit. So, I kept the character, of course, I kept my Atlas. This strategy will actually not really require you to have much of an Atlas at all, but I'll talk about that in a bit. And then I gave myself, again, 1 exalt to basically buy my initial maps, my initial mapping supplies, and everything that I was going to need. I actually gave myself 1 exalt and an additional 10 chaos because I bought two additional maps on accident, and yeah, so 1 exalt and 10 C was actually my starting point. Everything else was wiped clean, no div cards, no maps, no nothing from the previous 3 episodes. I put everything in dump tabs so that, again, I would have literally nothing, so all of this was empty. So let's talk about what I did and how much currency I made so far. So far in the series, or in the challenge, whatever you want to call it, I've played 6 hours, right, on the first day of the challenge. So this includes basically the moment that I actually got the currency ready to go and play the game, right? So I've got about 6 hours of actual playtime for generating currency. This is what our stash looks like. I've got 21 exalts here. I've got probably about another exalt or so in recombinators, maybe another exalt in core type things, whatever ordeal. I've got some sentinels, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Nothing else, really. Everything else is pretty much gone, other than the maps. I've got some maps as well. I've got 55 maps worth about 5C each. So breakdown of the excellence and everything else, basically. So excellence says that I'm worth about 32x. I'll go ahead and showcase what the strategy is in a bit. But that's how we made that. And then, of course, there's also all of this, which is not accounted for in excellence. So 5 times 40C. So what that is essentially the Conqueror maps that I have. That's worth about 200C. Then I have Elder Guardian maps. Got 19 of those at about 16C each. Then I've got 17 Shaper Guardians at about 12C each. So that's another 204. And then I've got another 275 from those CD squares that I just showed you guys. So that's 275. And then I've got a Reforged Keep Suffix from a Harvest. So that's 120. So that's another, let's see, another 6x or so. So plus 32, it means that we've made roughly 38 exalts so far in 6 hours, which means that our hourly income has been around 6.3 exalts per hour. That's pretty good, considering that we started with a single exalt, and we have a character which is worth about 2x. So how did I make so much money if I'm not actually abusing recombinators, and I'm not abusing crafting, I'm not abusing any of that? Well, I came up with a couple different strategies that have been known in the past, and I decided to kind of mix them up together. And this is essentially boss rushing paired with the usage of sentinels, and also as a side note, also basically doing imprint rushing. Or sorry, not imprint. Invitation rushing. So let's go ahead and run you guys through the strategy. Now, there's going to be a few links in the description of this video. The first one is going to be my current build. The second one is going to be my actual tree for my actual passive tree. Or sorry, my Atlas passives. And then the last one is going to be my Sentinel tree. So let's talk about that first, the Sentinel. The only Sentinel that I'm using is the Obsidian Apex Sentinel, and this is the tree that I'm using. Now, the reason I'm using this is very simple. The idea is that I want to just run to the boss and kill it and get out, right? That's the only goal. So all I use is the Apex Sentinel, and what I'm looking for on it is essentially just Empire monsters have increased quantity. Now, does it actually work? Is it actually worth it? I don't know, but they're super cheap. So I've kind of just been buying those, and then when I have a few of them that are empty, I kind of recombinate them, and most of the time you'll end up keeping the quantity, and you'll get the charges, so you can just kind of keep reusing them, and they're very cheap and available. Now the tree in itself, we're basically going to be going for 30% Sentinel rewards, or likely to be Sentinel rewards, because that's a really good one. We're getting another 8% duplicated here. We're getting found normal rarity found normal rarity Sentinels go to magic, so that's cool. We're getting chance for Sentinels to be duplicated, and then rewards are more likely to be Sentinel rewards, and then we also have the big one, rewards are more likely to be less common. I think that this is pretty good. I don't really know. I haven't done extensive testing or anything like that, but less common is always pretty good normally. Power cores to be duplicated, that's why we have quite a few of those. Despite the fact that we're not actually running maps. Sentinels have 20% increase in empowerment. This is basically just like adding, the monsters are harder to kill, but they also give you more stuff. Enemies empowered by Apex have 20% chance for rewards to be doubled. This is pretty nice, but it makes the bosses even harder. Apex Sentinels do not empower rares, but they have 30% increased rewards. This is really nice because it means that we don't have to worry about when we pop it. It's only going to empower the bosses. And then we have all the small nodes for cast speed, empowerments, not consume charges, whatever, right? Then we also have the Apex Sentinels can empower an additional enemy. This is nice because it means that normally you can empower like 4. Now we're going to be able to empower 5, and I'll talk about why that's important in a sec. Then 30% Sentinel power don't matter. And then Apex Sentinels sap enemies is like whatever. The only reason I got this is for the to not consume charges. And then, of course, the Apex Sentinel, and that's my whole tree. Okay, now let's look at the actual Atlas tree, and then I'll talk about the actual strategy, and I'll run a map to showcase it, and yeah. So the idea is that we're boss rushing, which means we're getting to the boss as fast as possible, killing the boss and leaving the map. So we're basically going to only get things which are going to make that better. So what's actually mandatory on this tree? Not very many things. All you really want is to have as many of the 0.5% chance for map drops to be duplicated. You can see that I have 18%. So the maximum is 18.5, but the last one is right here, which is just kind of far away, so I'm not going to get that. But yeah, this is the only thing that actually matters, right? So if you look at duplicated, right? Duplicated here, this is essentially what you want. You want to have all these duplicated nodes. That's it, right? Nothing else is really mandatory. Now, because we're killing a lot of bosses, it's pretty good to get a lot of master missions. So I'm stacking up Jun missions for potential future tests. I'm stacking up Alva missions for potential future juicing. Otherwise, I'm getting things that are very, like, free, but I'm not actually going to go out and look for them, right? So I'm going to go on my map. If I encounter them on the way to the boss, I'll do them. Otherwise, I won't. So this is basically the Essence, the Strongbox, and also the Smuggler's Cache. So these are basically 3, sources or revenues of income, or not revenues, sorry. 3 ways of making currency that are not very consistent, but that they add up, a little bit over time. And then I'm also getting altar nodes, even though they're pretty much completely useless. Now, the only other thing that I would say is actually kind of mandatory is actually this node over here, Enrich Entities, because it gives you map bosses have 20% chance to be duplicated if possible. This is going to be very important because of what I was talking about earlier, where the Sentinel has a +1 enemy, right? So because these Sentinels do 4, with that, it makes it 5. And because we're going to be looking for maps with 3 bosses, we're going to get 6 bosses. So this is why we actually do this Enrich Entities, to try to take advantage of the full power of our Sentinel. Otherwise, because it's a boss rushing strategy, we're basically going to be getting all of the things in regards to boss rushing, which means Etched by Acid. Now, you could also go on the other side and go with the Searing Exarch. It's the exact same thing. Don't matter. I went on this side though. So yeah, Etched by Acid for 10% to reward double. Now this doesn't matter because we're not actually farming altars. Obviously we want Conquerors for the 30% increased chance to get a Conqueror map. They're already super rare. We also want Remnants of the Past for 30% chance to drop a Shaper or Elder Guardian. That's, a decent bit of money. As I showcased, let's see. So I've got a total of, let's see. So 41 minus 5. So what's that, like 36 Guardian maps of either Shaper or Elder in 6 hours. So that's 6 maps an hour. So that's not bad considering, they're worth a decent chunk. That's almost like an X an hour just in maps. So that's not bad. And then we are finally going to also get the synthesized node for the 0.5%, which is going to add to our actual regular baseline. And this is going to give us a decent amount of synthesized maps. Now, over the course of 6 hours, I've yet to drop a single Cortex. I've dropped, I believe, 4 or 5 synthesized maps, so you could say I got a little unlucky there. But yeah, they're relatively common, but you can also go on some pretty unlucky streaks. But that's really it. Realistically speaking, the mandatory things are everything in regards to boss rushing, so remnants, these nodes, this node, and then either S by Acid or Baptized by Fire, and then all of the 0.5%. Everything else is essentially flex. I highly recommend getting Enrich entities as well. Alright, now this is a baseline strategy. You can actually push this further if you wanted to by also going with, let's see, where is it? Exiled Will, and then also Seance, which we were actually very close to. So I could actually drop, say, the cash stuff, right, for all of the stuff related to, say, heist, or I could also drop essence stuff. I could drop, strong boxes, and just go with that instead with Exiled Will, and I believe also with Unrelenting Torment, and that would give us a good chance of actually getting up to at least 3 possessed monsters per map, and then we could use the possessed monsters drop either gilded or winged scarabs, depending on the sexton that we use, and this would actually increase our revenue by quite a bit. But because I was kind of lazy and I was starting with very little currency, I wasn't going to be able to afford buying those sextons in the first place, so instead I decided not to do it. But it's something that is very much to be considered if you wanted to push this strategy to probably an extra X or 2 per hour, just from those possessed monsters. But the difference is you have to find them, right? So if you're boss rushing and you don't find them, that can be a problem. Okay, that's pretty much the strategy. Very, very simple. Now, how did I make that much money in 6 hours, right? From starting from scratch, almost 40 exalts, so half a headhunter, a little over half a headhunter actually, in 6 hours, starting with barely anything and a very scuffed build, right? This is not exactly an expensive build. Well, let me go ahead and show you guys the actual strategy, because it's basically cut into 2 different parts. You've got the boss rushing strategy and you've got the invitation rushing strategy. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose a map which is very small, which you can boss rush very quickly. Now, I go with City Square because it's a triple boss map, which means if I pair it up with the enriched entities, it can give a lot of value to my Apex Sentinels. It's not mandatory. I just think it's a very good map for this specific strategy, and they're quite easy to buy in bulk, especially if you can run all map mods, because you can buy a ton of them corrupted already from people who are just, dropping them corrupted from strong boxes and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and basically we're going to run 28 maps where we're going to run all the way to the boss, and we're going to kill the boss, and then on the 28th map, it's going to drop us a Screaming Invitation. Now, because of the 10% chance for duplication thing, it's more going to be around 25 maps. So around 25 maps. Now, if I'm buying these maps for, let's say, 6 chaos each, right? And this is, a relatively high price. That means that I'm going to be spending 150 C, and then the invitation is worth 1.2x, and that's a minimum. If you actually have a little bit of currency, you can afford to sell them in bulk and get 1.3 for them, but let's just say 1.2, and I'm going to get 216 C, which means every 25 maps, I'm going to profit, let's see, 66 C divided by 25, which means every single map I put in my map device and I go ahead and kill the boss, I'm going to make 2.6 chaos. Now, this doesn't sound very high because it's not, but the reason for that is because there's everything else. You also need to consider all of the other things that are going to drop, the Elder Guardians, the Shaper Guardian maps, the Synthesized maps, the Conqueror maps, and of course, the Apex Sentinel rewards. So, next, once you've ran all of your actual good maps, your Shady Square, right, and you get to the point, they're going to drop these bosses, right, from the actual map. We're going to drop a lot of maps, like a ton of maps, but they're not going to be necessarily good ones. So what I do after that is I take 24 bad maps, and I basically enter the map, I proc the influence, and I leave, right? So these maps I could easily buy in bulk on TFT or whatever for 3 or 4 chaos each, very, very cheap. And then it's basically the same thing, except I don't get to the boss and I don't kill the boss, so I don't actually use my Apex Sentinel. I literally just go in and proc the influence. So I'm going to go ahead and showcase one example of both of those real quick. So what I typically do is, because I'm not going to be killing anything in this map, I can run it white, I don't care. But when it comes to my City Square, which is my good map, I'm going to alkit because I try to get as much rewards as possible, and I can run every map mod. So let's just showcase first off the non-killing strategy, if you will, where we're basically not going to kill anything, or almost anything. So we're starting at 0 out of 28. So of course we're going to use the Eater of World Influence. Otherwise we would use the Searing Exarch if we're using the Searing Exarch version of the strategy. We're not going to put any map mods or anything like that, just quantity. And then here comes, this is what it's going to look like if you were doing the non-killing strategy. So you're basically just going in the map. You're just going to kill stuff enough to proc the influence. And that's it. And you'll see it very clearly because you're going to see a big explosion on your screen whenever this actually happens. So let's see. All right, there we go. So if I find something like an essence on my way, then I'll actually go ahead and clear it because there's no reason not to. But then after that, right, I cleared my essence because I found it. I've got my actual proc of the influence. I leave. I'm not staying any longer than that. This is one map. This is 1 out of 25. So because I could easily buy these maps in bulk for, let's say, 3C each, and their value is basically 216C divided by 25, it's pretty valuable. I just made like 6C profit in that time that you just watched this, right? But that's not where the most of our money is going to come from. Most of our money is going to come from the actual good map. So let me just showcase what that looks like. The only difference is that we're actually going to run to the boss and kill him. We are also going to do the Lee mechanics, which we encounter along the way, but that's about it. If I find a deli mirror, I'll probably go ahead and run it all the way up to 5 bars of loot on the main reward. If it's a good one, otherwise I'll basically just get the 4, which is very, very quick. Only a few packs of monsters, and then I'll go to the boss. Alright, so in this case, we didn't get a deli mirror, anything like that. We're not going to clear the Legion. Our build is not good for that. So we're going to rush over to these boss, and then we're going to proc our Sentinel, right? Apex Sentinel, which is going to give us some additional rewards. It's going to make the boss very tanky, and this build is, again, pretty scuffed. So we're going to take a little bit of time to actually kill these bosses, which is why I'm saying, like, if you're actually doing this exact strategy with a much faster build, you could probably make a lot more money per hour than I was making, but that's okay. It's still not too bad. So let's go ahead and kill all these bosses, and there you go. And we're going to grab all our loot, boom, 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 and we're just going to leave, right? So in that specific map, I made the 2.6 chaos profit that I was talking about, but I also got everything else. So in this case, everything else was 1 chaos, 9 fusings, which is about 2 chaos, 4 alks, which is about another chaos in splinters here, another chaos in splinters there. So I probably just made about 12C or so from that map, and then I also got a Sentinel, which, you know, could be good. And basically, that's it. That's literally all I did, and that made me roughly 6.5x an hour because it's all about speed. Again, if you're doing this on a faster build, if you're doing this on a stronger build, you can kill the bosses faster, you get to the bosses faster, you can make a lot more money. And the cool thing is these invitations sell literally instantly. It's pretty insane, the demand for them. But that's essentially how I went about making that amount of money. Now, I'm actually considering setting up for Seance with the Sextant to drop a bunch of scarabs, but I don't know, I'm kind of lazy about it. Now, in terms of the excellence and where the money comes from and whatnot, I'll give you guys a quick breakdown of that real quick, and that's going to be it for the video. So I'm picking up all Sentinels that are getting through the filter, so that is basically the red and blue ones, because those are the ones that are actually worth it. Funny, because I'm actually not using either of those. But those are the ones that I'm picking up, and I'm putting aside the ones that are kind of decent in a 50C tab. Of course, most of these are worth more like 20, 30C, but that's okay. Otherwise, of course, all of the recombinators and power cores, I'm keeping those aside. I'm going to sell them in bulk at Exalt ratios, because that's how I'm going to get the most for them. I kind of stopped picking up bases. They kind of stopped selling, but I'm still, you know, trying here. I've got a few claws, but nothing crazy. These are just Sentinels that I will be using. Essentially, it's really just quantity and as many charges as possible on an Apex. That's it. Nothing else. No specific rewards whatsoever. Okay, otherwise, so these Astrogalies, for example, are from Sentinel, right, as a reward. Otherwise, of course, we're going to get all of the maps, and that's going to be a good amount of money. Div cards, we're not really going to get any of that. Sometimes we're going to get them as a reward from the Sentinels, but they're going to be pretty bad overall. Sometimes we get a decent one. Like, for example, I got a nurse card. I got a patient card. I got a Pride of the First One. I got a, what are the Exalt cards, right, for 10x or something. I can't remember the name of it, or 2x 10 cards. So yeah, you're gonna get some stuff. I got some Ritual Vessels a little bit. This also as a, you know, Sentinel reward. You know, a little bit of Breach, a little bit of Scarabs. Actually, decent few Scarabs. Some of those are from the Operatives Strongboxes, because sometimes I do find the Operative Strongbox while on my way to the boss. And because we are using Secret Operations, we're going to get a decent bit of Scarabs whenever we do find it, but it's kind of rare. Now, the Riding Invitations, we're going to sell those in bulk. They sell for 12 per Exalt, so a lot better than if you were to sell them individually, pretty much. Oils, as you can see, not very many at all. Essences, we get those quite a few. We get quite a few of them. We end up finding those on our way to the boss quite often because we are using Stream of Consciousness, which means there's a 50% more base chance, and we get all of the essence nodes on the tree, plus the base chance for essences in our maps. So we actually end up with a pretty decent amount of essences, considering the fact that we're not looking for them at all. And of course, the Apex Sentinel sometimes gives you like upwards of 20 Screaming Essences at a time, which is pretty insane, because you can basically turn those into like 6 or 7 Shrieking, which sell for like a Chaos each, so it's pretty nasty. It's pretty good money. Not much in terms of Metamorph. Decent amount of Deli stuff. Now, all these Deli orbs are basically from clearing maps that have the Deli Mirror. So whenever I do get the Deli Mirror, like I said, if it's a good reward as the main reward, I clear all the way up to 5 tiles. If it's a bad reward, then I clear all the way up to 4, and then I stop it. And then I go kill my boss. So that's where that comes from. You know, a third of a Simulacrum and then some other stuff. Fossils also from the Sentinel rewards as well. Not really much value there. And that's pretty much it. Now, if we were to actually look at the Excellence, there's not a lot of fluff. There's a little bit out of the 5,600 chaos that we have on Excellence. I would say that probably about 4.8 or so thousand is very, very easy liquid stuff to sell. And then there's also going to be a tiny bit of fluff at the end, like some bad divination cards and stuff like that. But they barely account for anything. So yeah, upwards of basically like 5.5k out of 5.7k. So yeah, there's really not much fluff going on there. So it's very, very consistent. And again, the faster you go, the more damage you do to kill the bosses, the faster, the more money you're going to make. Because at the end of the day, there's a very large supply of maps, and there's really, really high demand for the invitations. So before I go, as always, I do want to say a massive thank you to my supporters. I'm not sure why that's so small. But I also do want to say that this is hopefully going to be a strategy which, unlike the previous Sad to Chat episodes, is going to be a lot more, relatable and a lot more replicatable for most of you guys, because considering the build that I'm playing and the results that I'm getting, and that is without getting, incredible luck. Like I said, I have yet to drop even a single Cortex, let alone like a doubled Cortex or anything like that. But again, big thank you to Jaden and Rocky, Max, Solmonk, Exo, Mr. Squirrel, Thomas, Mass, Snake, The Great Master, Alex, Tim, Mercury, Bert, Kai, Nailed, Jarvis, Jobin, Bitizen, Vaith, Talismarian, Ando Durgo, as well as Sins Eater, anybody else who supported me in the past, and anyone else who wishes to remain anonymous. Hopefully in the next episode, we'll basically be at the Headhunter mark, or very close to, and then we're probably going to use that currency, get a Headhunter, and then also farm a little bit extra to then make another build, which is going to be used for another farming strategy in the future episodes. So hopefully you guys enjoy the series, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.